as people come into the Zoom platform. But yeah, so I'm glad. So Wendy, Pily was plagued by the earthquakes in Mexico earlier this year.
Oh no, I didn't realize that impacted you all.
Oh, it was
I'm
right in
very,
Mexico, right, Pily?
excuse me?
Well, the earthquake was right in Mexico City earlier this year. Is that right?
No. But
No?
we always have earthquakes. And
Okay.
yes, I think we had one recently. Of course, I didn't feel it. I heard it in the news. There has not been any impact recently, but we are very used to that. So I think that the last one was less than a year ago.
Okay.
And it was really, really strong. Really
Yeah, that was.
strong.
Oh gosh.
But there was no damage or anything.
Okay.
So yes, I think that we are really preventive in that part. So I do have in my house my indicators, my lamps,
really?
and I look, yes, of course, everywhere. When I feel a little bit dizzy, which is very, very frequently, I look at my lamps. So if you see my eyes going somewhere else, it's because I'm just making sure that it is not moving.
Wow.
Yes, but that is pretty normal.
Yeah, here in Puerto Vallarta, they had one on September 19th and in Puerto Vallarta. And the interesting thing is on September 19th every year, they do a citywide drill. And they did that this morning. So everybody was evacuating and doing their drill. And then that afternoon, I think it was a 7.7 Richter scale actual earthquake.
And they had just done a practice.
And that has happened, my understanding. I wasn't here yet, but it happened before on September 19th. So it's kind of interesting. And yes,
wow.
My friends were running because in the condo, the ceiling was falling and it was pretty scary. Yeah.
That is scary. Yeah, especially after hearing what's happened in Turkey in the
But I was going to say, I have a friend whose family is very close to the epicenter in Turkey, and he said that his family was fine, but he said they're sleeping out on the street because one, they're worried about the actual structural damage of their home, and two, possible like aftershocks and things like that. So obviously that's just like a hard feeling to be so far away and know your family is sleeping on the street, I mean, you're glad they're okay and they're going to be okay, but that's hard.
And it's particularly concerning because there's so much new construction and really paying attention to the quality of that construction, even from the code compliance with bricks. I mean, these buildings can fall down and sadly people, end up in the street.
Yeah, well, I know that's definitely how they've upgraded the San Francisco infrastructure. I mean, these events have a way of helping these places advance forward in building.
Yes.
So hopefully that will occur. Hello, Howard.
Hi there. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Howard.
Hi, how are you?
We were just talking about how the Earth moves across the globe. and
today's topic for People Strategy Forum is plate tectonics and how it impacts our people around the world.
We could be talking tsunamis, we could be talking earthquakes, we could be talking hurricanes and fires. It's just phenomenal. I think as we all are being more socialized, I think we're all learning a lot about what's going on in the world with some of the catastrophes and just God bless that nobody gets hurt.
Don't you know global warming doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that they figured that one out just by observation that it's true. So we'll see.
And haven't we heard that in the United States we have more tornadoes in the United States? I heard that statistic recently. I don't know why that is. I'll have to look that one up.
Just have such a big open wide plain, I guess that's perfect.
Maybe
for
the
that.
way the mountains is.
It's much more common now, right? There's many more and more destructive.
Seems so. Isn't this a positive subject? Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Happy after Valentine's Day.
We don't want to stress ourselves.
Yeah.
All right, well, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and start the recording, and we can jump into things here. So let me just share my screen, and then I also have to just kick off the live stream here, and then we can get started.
Sam, can you open the chat to everybody, and I'll monitor the chat?
Absolutely, I'll do that right now. Perfect. And one moment here. Okay, perfect. We'll kick things off. Well, welcome everyone to the People Strategy Forum. The People Strategy Forum is a place where we can all come together as HR professionals and elevate the overall profession. And so we have a lot of people, our listeners here, a lot of people from C-suite, the people that are founders of organizations and HR professionals overall. So welcome. We also, just to give you an understanding of how we operate here, we are live on a Zoom platform, but we multicast to several other platforms. So you might be listening or seeing this on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. If you're on one of those platforms, feel free to go ahead and ask questions, and we'll get back to those questions a little bit later. But if you're on the Zoom platform here live, just go ahead and drop those those questions into the chat box, and we'll take those as we're going. As Wendy just mentioned, I'm going to ensure that I unlock the chat box so everybody can get in there and make those comments. Also, another thing is that this in a couple of weeks will be turned into a podcast, and it'll be released on our People Strategy Forum podcast that you can listen to at your leisure. So welcome everyone. I'm going to be introducing our hosts here. My name is Sam Reeve. I'm with the comp team, along with Howard Nisewitz and Wendy and Shar. We all join together on projects here and there. And so Shar is a small business expert and also an entrepreneur on many fronts. And so she brings a very important perspective. We have Howard Nisewitz, who is a compensation practitioner, a systems expert, and comes with a deep level of expertise in large companies and also dealing with those software systems for HR. And we have Sumit Singla, who is out of India. And Sumit comes with a very big international footprint, as you can imagine, working with some of the large consulting firms that in his past and now is a practitioner out of India. And then of course we have Wendy Graham. Wendy Graham is a master trainer along with a master diver now. Is that right, Wendy? Yes. Yeah. So she's a woman with many interests. So we're pleased to have her here. But overall, I want to ensure that we acknowledge our expert speaker today, which is Pily Martinez from Anzarone and out of Mexico. And so Pily is an executive headhunter, and she uses the TMA method in her process and works with a lot of leading companies in Mexico and ensuring that they're finding the best people for her clients and as they bring them in, and ensure that they are successful once they're in place as well. So she's going to talk to us today about the importance of having a cohesive talent process and ensuring that those very important candidates come in and are have a positive experience in the workplace as they start out. So Pily, can you tell us a little bit more about just how you started out in your field and how you help companies that are in Anzarone?
Of course, Sam. First of all, thank you very much for this introduction. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am very happy to be here. This is my third time in People Strategy Forum. I really enjoy this space, so thank you very much. Yes, I am an industrial engineer. So I began working in consumption companies in logistics, supply chain, operations, but the destiny sent me to HR. Let me tell you that I used to be an HR client, a very, very difficult, strict HR client. I never, ever understood the HR function from that perspective. I understood it from the leader perspective, from the difficulty in the operation perspective. So when I began working in Arancione, it was my first contact as HR, you know, so it was pretty difficult for me at the beginning. I had to begin from scratch, understanding the foundations of HR. I was invited by my partner and brother, Jorge Martinez, which is the founder of Arancione. We have just celebrated our anniversary, our 13th anniversary this month. So I am pretty proud of this because he began the organization 13 years ago, and he began preparing himself with the best recruiters in the world, but not academically, you know, not in the academy part, but in the practice part. So when I joined Arancione, he was the best headhunter I've ever met. And it is not, I'm not saying this because he's my brother. I'm saying it because I've had experience working with headhunters as a candidate. So you should know that I had like a master's degree being a candidate. I always, throughout my career before HR, I always wanted to grow. I wanted to be interviewed by companies. I even had a 12 interviews process with Coca-Cola company once in my career. So I really met a lot of interviewers. And when I knew his process and the interest he really had of doing a match between the candidate and the organization, I really loved it. And I really got passionate about that. So that was my beginning in HR. And my first challenge there was how to do the process a little bit better. And what I saw at the beginning was that there was this intangible part of the process that was giving feedback of, I don't like that candidate, you know? And it was so subjective that I was desperate. And I was like, how can I translate you don't like, you know? How can I translate that into, does it really work or does it not work? So that's when I met TMA. And my objective was to bring a method that could help us do a better process, not only for our clients, but for the candidates. And right now, that is how we have improved our process. And that is what it leads us to the topic that we are covering today, which is the alignment in acquisition and how does it impact into the development of our organization.
Yes, thanks, Pily. I mean, I really appreciate when you're bringing up the when certain managers say, "Well, I just don't feel right about that particular person," or you know, they're and really understanding whether or not it's their internal bias or if there's really a reason behind it is quite important, right? So it's great to have these tools to bring this awareness to us to ensure that we're looking at the sourcing process fairly among people, for sure.
And you know what? There is also a very important factor when doing this talent acquisition process, which is dealing with a hiring manager. You need a certain level of seniority. And by that, I am not talking about age, but also experience in trying to understand their needs with the proper questions, because we are used to having recruitment processes in which we are like waiters, you know, what do you want? And that's it. But that doesn't work, because the most important thing is the hiring manager sometimes does not know what he or she wants. And that happened to me as a hiring manager. I remember the first time a recruiter asked me, okay, what is the profile that you want in your team? And I was like, aren't you the expert? You should tell me what I need, you know? So it was very difficult for me to translate that into proper words so that the recruiter could look for the right profile. So that is the seniority that I mean, that is really important in a recruiting process. It doesn't matter the level, you know, but it is very important to know how to manage a hiring manager and how to help him or her define what they need, because that definition does not only impact in the acquisition process, but also in achieving the results. And let me explain a very simple example. A purchasing position. What you normally need in a purchasing position is someone that is really compliant with the process, because you don't want to have conflict of interests in the process, right? And then if you really want that, you bring someone that is really compliant to the process. What happens? That this person being compliant to the process might be like this. And then the process, even though it is compliant, it is not useful because it makes you take a long time in the process. So what is the difference of having someone compliant to the process and having someone that solves the problems, you know? So that is a huge difference. So you might get someone compliant, but this person doesn't solve the problem and it makes the problems bigger. So that is why it is very important to understand what are the obstacles of a role, what is the environment this person is going to work with, what is the type of people he's going to deal with, what is the time of challenges and the solutions that he or she might need to bring into the table, so that we can look for people that are not only experienced in that, but are comfortable doing that.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of things there, like the environment, which also has to do with the culture of the company and so forth, and also the of course the most obvious one is the skills and ability and the competencies that the job requires. But then there's also the specific, what it's like to work on that team and also with that manager itself, right? So there could be certain challenges among the team and a certain management style that where certain candidates are going to be more successful than others. Is that true?
Exactly. Totally true, Sam. There is a say that says you may have the best candidate and he might not be successful. And it is not his fault or her fault. You know, it is also a match between the candidate and the leader. And that is pretty important. And sometimes when we have a lot of turnover in an organization, it is very important to understand if the leadership style is the correct one for the profiles that we want to bring into the organization. Just and talking about ways of working. It's like, for example, I need someone that is really creative, but that likes the numbers because he will be in the need of analyzing a lot. So, okay, you want attention to detail, but you want creativity. You're talking about two different things. It is very difficult to find someone developed in both parts and feeling comfortable. So we need to define what is the characteristic that is going to help this person achieve the results that you want. And when you ask the leaders that, then their mind changes and they say, oh, you're right. I want attention to detail, but if this person is not creative, I can have attention to detail with someone else, you know? And if we want to push someone in the other way of his or her personality, then it is not going to be a good result. You might have like the honeymoon moment of 3 months, but after that, everything is going to be a mess.
Right. Each of us has the ability to flex in certain aspects, but if it's not really our talent, or if it's not our preferred working style, then after a while we become worn out, right? And if we meet a period of stress or things like that, where it might come apart. We might have a different behavior that is showing than what we intended, right? So I think that's a very important thing to consider for sure. And the TMA method helps us do that, right?
Totally. That is an essential part of my process, because even though you will never forget about the interviews, talking to the candidates. In my process, I don't have an interview with the candidates. I really ask the candidates to take pretty long time to talk to me, because I really like to understand their history, their knowledge, their experience, but also the things that they don't tell me, which is what I can see in the TMA. And this happens, this is a normal process, because we always want to say the proper things in an interview. We always want to say what the other wants to hear, but that may not be the truth, and this is not because we are liars. And I want to be very specific with that, because I have seen a lot of attacks in social media, in LinkedIn, in which the candidates, they say, yes, you don't trust the candidates and you really want to investigate the candidates. It's not that, but it is very important to understand that the role is proper to the candidate. If a candidate is not going to be successful, he or she is going to be the one that suffers, So it is very important to have that information, and TMA helps us to have that data, because it uses positive psychology. And I really like that, because when we do these kind of testings, we are always thinking, did I did good? How are my results? Are they fine? Of course they are fine, because they're talking about yourself. Being yourself is always the best thing. And what I see there is if they will be comfortable in an organization that really is hierarchical, or the other way around. I can see if the leadership style that the organization is needing is aligned with the personality of this candidate. I can also see if the candidate is going to be frustrated because the company is really bureaucratic. I can also see there if a candidate is going to be comfortable being introverted, because sometimes we might think that being introverted is not very good, but it has a very positive part, and we need to understand that. So the way that I use these results is not the common way that human resources use them. Like, I have the results and I share it with the organization. No. Why? Because you need to have the knowledge of the method to give the proper understanding. And I can see Wendy's face. She's saying, yes, of course. I'm sure you had this expertise at the beginning, this experience. You might understand something that is not quite good, and that can impact in making a proper decision from the candidate. So my use here with this information is that when I share the candidates to my client, I am completely sure that they are a good match. And then the organization can make a proper decision based on the fact that the candidate is a right fit. So that is the first part. And the second one is the experience of the candidate. Most of the times, when you do these kind of exercises, you don't know the result, and you don't know what they are going to do with this result. So in our experience, the candidates, they love doing this exercise because they see the results in the moment. Once they finish the results, they have the opportunity to look at them, and then they receive a very small training that we have built for them in videos, in which we show them how they can use the data, not only for this process, but for any process? How can they share this information with any other recruiter or for their own development? So I think that it is like a win-win situation, you know?
Hey, Pily, I had a question. Would you also have the hiring manager go through the TMA to understand the things that are critical there?
That is a great question, Howard. Yes, we do it in most of our process. We depend on the hiring manager to dedicate the time and to really want to know it. So, of course, we've had hiring managers that say, yes, I'll do it later. But most of the times when we get that information, the results are really interesting because it is very good to have the match there, you know? The personality is going to be a good match or not. But however, I'm sorry for the wording, but this is very important to understand. To do a proper match using TMA, you don't need to have people that are the same, but to understand how to use the talents. I'm going to share an example that we have in Arancione. My brother and I, we work together every day. We have different roles, but we're entirely different in certain things. And one of the things is persistence. He is really persistent. And that is why he's in charge of the commercial part. If a client says no, he doesn't take it personally. And he says, okay, it is not now, but in a month, you might say yes. In my case, I have a very low need of persistence. It is really difficult for me. So that is why I am not in the commercial part, because I receive a no and I am like, okay, next, let's go to something else. And that is the talent that helped me bring this method into our table. Because for me, it was very simple to change our process to somewhat different or better. So if I understand that, it is a very good mix. But if I don't understand that, I will always say, I am terrible in commercial part. You're good. I don't want to work with you. You're persistent, etc., etc. So it is very important to understand the best way to work together with your talents and not to make the obligation of having someone exactly like you, you know?
I think this is super important to talk this in the context of a team, and exactly your perspective there, Pily. You can have a particular person that thinks is very strong in one side of a particular skill or talent, and then somebody that's directly the polar opposite. And perhaps when they work together, sometimes there can be a little bit of friction because they are not communicating in the same language. And so often, we can find a person that is a joiner, right, in that team that can bring those two people together and help interpret the communication, help bring the perspective in a way that both parties can understand. Do you see this happen?
Totally. And when you hire someone, there is a risk. The risk that, what if this person is not going to work? That is the first risk. The second one is, what if I don't lead this person properly? And the third one is, what if we don't get the enough time to know ourselves, So this is why TMA shares information that helps you reduce a little bit this struggling part that you were saying, Sam, in which you learn how to be with someone. It is like in a relationship, talking about Valentine's Day. That's the very same thing. There is a process in which you try to know the person, and this is a little bit of struggle, You try to show your face, and your smile, but deep inside you're saying, he doesn't like this thing, so I need to change it, or I don't like this thing, so I need to tell that person. And this is a normal process professionally as well. But with this information, what we do is to prepare both parts to understand what is the best way of working with the other person. The knowing is still going to be there, but it is like a guide, you know. I always tell my candidates, you can share this with your partner, you know, your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend, etc. You can share this with him or her, and they will be happy because it is the best way of reducing this struggle.
Well, I just want to interject here. It's great working with you. I think as an HR professional, I think there is, as we throw terms around like TMA and some of these terminologies, I think that as an HR professional, it's kind of hard to really understand what we were doing 15 years ago, for example, and what we are moving towards today. So I was on many committees and in charge of many committees with a healthcare system of about 150,000 employees. And there was a constant need to change the hiring process to reduce the number of days to hire, to improve the quality, and to reduce the percentage of turnover within the first 90 days. And so there were many strategies, such as, particularly in healthcare. At first, we had recruiters that were located in each hospital that was very familiar with the leaders and the executives and the culture. But then we became very much systemized, and they decided, so for example, they had one nursing recruiter for all 22 hospitals, one, and then they'd have one recruiter for all the transporters, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately it didn't improve our retention numbers. It did not improve. Later, I started seeing maybe 8 years ago, or my numbers might be off, we started using the AI and the technology and doing robot interviewing. And but also, in my perspective, yeah, that was great. The person answered the questions correctly on a chat or electronic robot asking the question. But the real understanding the personality type and the leader and the team was really not assessed with that. I too, as a business leader, use the TMA now and have piloted a lot of what you're talking about. Really, it has really personalized, you know, understanding the competencies, the talents, the drives, the personality types, and how they integrate with the other team members, because all those team members complement one another, and we all don't need to be the same. Because in the past, I think that we had a focus of hiring clones to ourselves. And I think today we appreciate that it's about diversity, it's about interchange of ideas, perspectives, progressiveness, particularly in this world that we're moving a zillion miles an hour in social media space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to my question, is how have you seen the progression of talent management strategy when it ties into recruitment move, at least in the last 15 years or 10 years? I mean, do you feel that, are we moving fast enough? And it is something that we're talking about today really going to make a change in our talent management strategy?
That is a great question, Shar. And before answering it, let me tell you that your experience is really interesting, and it is pretty common to see that even today. You know, I believe that it doesn't matter if we use technology. It doesn't matter if we do this matching. If HR is not connected with the business. I think that is the most important part. And I think that in your example, you said that that was like the first part that you tried, in which the recruiters were really part of understanding the hiring manager, their challenges, etc. What I have seen in the organizations is that whenever HR, it doesn't matter if it is one person or 20, but if HR is really in contact with the needs of the business, all your indicators will get better. Why? Because at first, knowing and understanding the needs can make you have a process in which you can prevent the vacancies, you know? So if you prevent that, you will be able to have like a bench. I don't know if the word is proper in English. In Spanish, it is la banca. It is the bench, a number of candidates that you have there available when you have a vacancy, you know? So that is in operative positions, but that helps a lot. Now, regarding the way that we are moving in HR, I still see, at least in Mexico. So I would like to listen to your experience in the US, because I think that we're moving in different pace, you know? In Mexico, what I have seen is that even the biggest associations of HR, they are still speaking 40 years ago language.
See.
And people are still focusing on the very same things, you know? Let me just give you an example. Profile description.
See.
It is exactly the same as it was 40 years ago, in which you use that format to post a vacancy, and then that description goes into a drawer and you don't use it again. Even the feedback that a manager is giving has nothing to do with the profile description. But what happens that we hire people using that profile description. So my point is, there is a small amount of organizations that are beginning to work into a dynamic environment in which a profile description, the new format, let's say, is updated constantly. Why? Because even in 1 year, the need in a position might change. So it is very important to update that constantly. And in this updating, it comes the alignment with the hiring manager, but also the alignment with the employees, but also the alignment with the candidates, and then we can move forward faster. I don't know what you have seen in the US. I would like to listen to you, Shar.
I have a unique perspective because I live half the year in the US and half the year in Mexico.
Okay.
So obviously I'm an expat, whatever. But I would say my perspective is definitely different from the hiring practices and the processes. And I see similar struggles on both sides. In Mexico, however, I do feel, and it'd be interesting to talk about this, it is more about relationship and communication and family and integration and you know, I just see a very different culture.
It is.
It's a very different culture. You know, and also in America, it's a different culture, a little bit more bureaucracy or whatever word you want to use. I don't want to be offensive to my Americans colleagues, but it is a very different thing. But as we are moving into globalization and hiring talent all across the world, it is now more than ever that we start having these heart-to-heart conversations, particularly when we're hiring globally and hiring candidates from other countries, because tools like this help open communication, and it's not just a traditional HR job description type of thing. What do you think, Sam?
Well, I think it's important for us to consider what types of tools we're using and how those tools are interfacing with the candidates that we're trying to bring in. I mean, a big buzz that right now, as a matter of fact, there was a Harvard Business Review article about, are you prepared to be interviewed by AI? Right, there's with the emergence of Chat GPT and so forth that are out there. This is where a lot of companies are thinking the future may be heading. And so I think that there's some advantages, and I think there's also a lot of disadvantages to potentially having artificial intelligence do the job there. But what are your thoughts, Pily? I mean, when we think about what artificial intelligence can bring into the recruiting space, do we feel like there's some positivity here, or is it all downside?
Even though I'm talking about technology and doing things different, I am really not very comfortable with, let's say, replacing the human contact in an interview process. I think that in that case, artificial intelligence is never going to replace the human contact. And let me explain why. And this is a, let's say, a behavior theory that we use in the TMA method that can help us understand how it changes. Normally, the behavior that we watch in an interview, it doesn't matter if it is an hour of interview, but we watch a behavior. It has three main factors that affects the behavior. First of all, the environment that we have during the interview. And this happens like in a daily basis, not only in an interview, but in your house, talking to your boss, etc. So the first factor is this environment. So if I have an environment that feels a little bit difficult to me, my behavior might show something, if I put it in colors, something white, but when I feel comfortable, my behavior might be shown in a black color. So that is the first factor that artificial intelligence will never be able to generate, that environment. The second one, of course, is what the candidate or the person might have learned during his or her experience, their experience leading, their experience working, knowledge, etc. And the third factor is the talent part, in which artificial intelligence might help us to understand the talents of the person. But what happens if this artificial intelligence doesn't know how to generate this environment with the person? Because at the end, it is a computer, So we need to make sure that in a conversation with someone in a daily basis, we consider this part of the environment, which is really important. Probably new generations might feel comfortable with that. Why? Because new generations, they don't like to even speak on the phone. They send WhatsApps, right? But we're still not there. I mean, most of the people that work in the organizations right now, they're still not that generation, So we need to be prepared, my belief, into those two, let's say, scenarios. But in my case, I am the past generation. I do feel more comfortable working with people directly, Of course, the use of artificial intelligence, I am really pro using that, but there are still many things that will not be able to be replaced by artificial intelligence. That is my thought. Of course, I know that I am not right 100%, but it is a little bit difficult for me.
Well, and in my perspective, I don't know about my colleagues here from America. We didn't even know what WhatsApp was. I've completely had to transform the way I communicate down here as well. And then also, I'd say many of us don't even, like you said, don't want to answer our phone anymore. It just takes too long, nor do we want to listen to voicemails and spend 45 minutes going through voicemails and calling everyone back. So I completely agree with you. I think quick, rapid, short communication is important. And then you build the time to have those deeper, more crucial, authentic communications. But at least you need to have that initial contact through technology.
But I would like to add something, Shar, also regarding the cultural differences that you were talking about. They really are. I mean, and it doesn't mean that one is better than the other, but actually working for having meetings, having sessions in Mexico, you take 60 minutes of the session, but it is pretty common to have a small part of chatting, talking about yourself, etc. And when saying goodbye, it is like, yes, have a nice day, you too, yes, and good luck with that. Yes, of course. In America, having sessions with people in the United States, it is like, okay, thank you very much, bye, you know? And when you don't understand those cultural differences, for example, a Mexican might feel like, he hung up, you know?
Yeah.
Why did he do that? And the other part might say, these Mexicans, I need to work, you know? So,
yeah.
And I think that those cultural differences, artificial intelligence, it will be very difficult to understand. I don't know. Probably we might need something, a dictionary that might say, you should act this way with Pily because she's Mexican, you know?
What do you think, Sumit?
I think that's an interesting set of points to discuss. Maybe we should do a demo session where one of us is generating interview questions using ChatGPT or another AI tool, and the other person is at the other end putting the same questions in and trying to see what robotic answers we can generate. So it should be an interesting exercise. But jokes apart, I'm probably from the older generation that believes human contact is more important, but I'm not sure how long this will be true. For example, I saw my 5-year-old daughter a couple of days ago making a digital birthday card for me on my own laptop. So the generation that's growing up using technology, they might feel a lot more detached, and they might be a lot more open to using tools like this and better use of technology. So maybe it's a mindset shift which will happen, but at least as of today, I do find whether it's AI or whether it's conventional technology, it doesn't really, it can make life easier for a human. I don't think it's equipped to replace the human interaction just yet, and maybe not for another 5 or 10 years. But of course, I could be wrong.
Hopefully, because if not, I will get out of a job.
Same here.
I don't think that's at any risk in the near term. I think that one of the pieces where AI can help, and one thing that we have to realize is AI is it's taught by humans, right? So by nature, any the imperfect pieces that humans have is put into AI, including bias, right? But we can also use these tools to help us identify bias as well, and to point out things that we may not be aware of as managers or organizations. So I think that right now we have to be careful of the human element. Of course, I don't think AI is going to be replacing the human element in that interaction. And just to dig deep on this, just a moment ago, Pily, you were mentioning that it's nice to chat and with a colleague. Well, if you chat with AI, the one thing that you think is does AI really care about me? Does it really care about what I did yesterday? or how it was tough with my daughter, or this morning, or I had an argument with my husband. Does AI really care? Whereas a human will have a perspective on that, and perhaps someday AI may, but I don't think that is in the near future. But but like I mentioned, I think that AI has a place to where it can help us be better at what we do. Maybe pointing out some of those biases that we're not aware of based on another group set, and a lot of other things that are in the recruiting realm, but definitely not something that take over some of those really important human elements, and that we look for in our colleagues, and what makes working as humans in a workplace very engaging, right?
And giving another thought about this part, Sam, we're talking about making the process better, but for the organization, right? But in my experience as well, the candidates, they have difficult feelings during the process. Even when they go through the process and they advance, they're happy, which is good. Congratulations from a machine or from a person, from a human being, is exactly the same, because they are happy. But when you have to give a bad news, when you're saying, thank you very much for participating in the process, but you were not the selection, the feeling might not be a good one, So handling that part and the attention and the follow-up to the person is also important. So I think that when considering artificial intelligence in improving processes, especially in recruitment, we should think also in the candidates, because having a great experience of the candidate, even though he's not going to be part of the organization, is really important, and the employer brand might be affected by that.
As I'm messing with my mute button here. So one other thing I wanted to bring up, Pily, I'd love to have your perspective on this, is that right now I'm I think there's a forgotten element in a lot of historic recruiting, and that is those people that don't show up well, right? That come into an interview and they just botch it. They just do a terrible job at the interview. They're so nervous, perhaps, and then we don't understand the true talents that they are bringing, that they have, that they can bring to an organization. And of course, we often label this group as the neurodiverse, those that approach and think about things differently than some others, and perhaps those that are just uncomfortable in certain environments. And so to ensure that we're reaching this critical talent, we're bringing this important talent into the workplace, are there methodologies or strategies that you employ to identify that, even when a person has not a great showing in an interview?
Yes. Normally, as in my process, as I was saying, I like to have more than one conversation with the people, because that might happen, Of course, I don't have 3 conversations with every candidate, of course not. But if I see something that might be misunderstood, etc., I'd like to be very transparent and ask direct questions regarding my concerns. I think that is a very important part. But what happens when this example that you're saying happens with my client, and the client says, it was a terrible interview, the person answered this and this and this, which has happened a lot, I always like to understand what was the question asked by the interviewer, because sometimes these answers, they are not the fault of the candidate, but the fault of the interviewer. And I would like to say something that people don't say normally, but to get the proper answers in an interview is the job of the interviewer, not the candidate. And when we're not conscious about that, these things happen. Let me say some examples. The candidate didn't go in deep into that experience of selling process. Did you ask about it? No, then it's your fault, not the candidate. This means that if you don't get the whole information from a candidate, it is the fault of the interviewer. And this interviewer can be a recruiter, it can be a hiring manager. So from my part of the process, I always share a guide of interview questions for my interviewers so that they know what kind of questions they can ask and how to go into deep into certain concerns, you know. It is not a good thing when you get at the end of the interview and say, I am concerned because he said something and I didn't like it. Okay, you need to have the evidence. And it is not because of not accepting a candidate, which is also good, but it is better to have the evidence that can tell you, I can't have this candidate because of this, you know, because that is going to be helpful for you in your process and helpful also for the candidate, you know. Last month, I had a phone call from a candidate. She didn't advance in a process and she said, Pily, I really would like to have your feedback about the interview with your client. What did he say about me? Is it something that I said that was not proper? I am really concerned. And I explained to her, it is not you. It is not anything that you said, but the approach of this position is more focused into something in which your expertise is not very strong, but it is not the way that you answered, you know. I'm sure that if you got into this position, you would feel weak. And that is why. And she understood it pretty well. And she felt strong with what she has, which is good. It is not the way that she answered. But I had another candidate that he said, Pily, what happened in that process? And I said, okay, you gave this feedback about this experience. The feedback was related to, I got into that position and I changed all the people in the team because the objective was to reduce the costs. So I let everyone go away from the company and bring my own team. Of course, the interviewer said, this is not part of my culture. I'm scared that you are going to do that here. When I asked about this to the candidate, he said, no, I explained that example so that she could see that I could adapt into what the organization wanted. It is not my approach of leadership, but I did what they asked me to do in order to get the result. So as you can see, it was not the very best way of the candidate to handle the question. So a preparation for the candidate to understand what do you want to know with this question before answering is a better way. I don't know if I answered your question, Sam, or it was like
no, I think that's good. I think it's important for leaders or the interviewer to ensure that they're digging in deep to approach the question from different angles and not just take a one and done approach, right? So I think that it's when you hear something that doesn't really meet your expectations or maybe you might feel is not the right fit, then you should take another try at it to understand the full perspective. I think that totally makes sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes we call that like peeling the onion, you know, that like you have these layers and you just have to keep peeling and finally you get to the heart of it, you know, and it does take, that is a skill, I think, to keep asking from different angles and keep trying to get examples and treat, you know, all of that. So
for sure.
And
Well,
doing that, you might have evidence that might surprise you, you know,
yes,
to confirm that you don't want that candidate or the other way around.
right. All right. Well, I know we've been talking a lot about a lot of things in this discussion, as far as, you know, using certain tools in the appropriate way, and those new technologies that are coming out right now. But real quick, I want to ensure that we are informing our listeners of our speaker next week. We're going to have Wade Forbes and Angelina join us. They're the authors of the book Pause, and this is actually a journal. But Wade does a lot of the graphic illustrations in this journal, and it's just a way for us to really pause on a daily basis and to think about diversity and inclusion, and be mindful of that in our practice as professionals. And so this is it's a great book that you can take notes in and also reflect. And we'll learn a little bit more about that approach with both Wade and Angelia next week on the People Strategy Forum. So looking forward to that discussion. All right, so back to you, Pily, on recruiting and having these important processes in place. So if people are interested in learning a little bit more about your approach and understanding you know, the different facets of recruiting people, no matter if they're in your own culture or cross-cultural and so forth, how can they get a hold of you and learn more, Pily?
Thank you for that, Sam. Right now, we're having a free webinar.
Mm-hmm.
I have the bad news that it is in Spanish. We haven't done it in English yet, but we will be working on that. So I'm going to share the link of that free webinar in the chat. I don't know if that is possible.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's talentoperfecto.arancione.com.mx. And of course, they can reach us as well in our social media. So I will be sharing in the chat as well our, I can't see you. Just, okay, good. We have Instagram, arancione.mx. In YouTube, we have our channel, which is Arancione TV or Arancione TV. And we are also having our page in LinkedIn, in which we share a lot of information, or you can follow me as well, Maria del Pilar Martinez. I'm over there. And our website, arancione.com.mx. You will be able to find a lot of information, our blogs. We try to share a lot of content so that not only organizations, but also hiring managers, HR people, and also candidates might take advantage of this information.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Pily. It was a joy having you on once again on the People Strategy Forum. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope to see you soon again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Pily.
bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.